Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm 𝗤𝘃𝗀𝗃, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley, owner and founder of 𝗤𝘃𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀. Mark, I missed you the last couple of days. Welcome back to Chicago. How was the conference you're out of town at?
Oh, good. Thanks. I appreciate being missed. So I went to 𝗬𝗏𝗶, National Association of Residential Property Managers Conference. Happens once a year. And it was kind of the first big post-COVID conference the group has had, or I've even been to. So I went to one last month. It was only like 150 people. It was pretty weak. But this was cool. We went there, and it's a 3-day thing, and a bunch of best practices, and you network with other property managers, and it's just a huge value. For me, I like to joke around because property management is very thankless. No one ever calls you up and says you're doing a good job at it. They only really call and complain. Now, when you get in a room with a bunch of those other people, at least everyone kind of is like-minded and knows what everyone else goes through and understands the fight. So that does feel that there's some therapy when you go to these conferences too with other property managers.
What's some things, now that this is a national conference, what are some things unique to Chicago that you might have said to them? They're like, oh my gosh, like that, we don't have to deal with that here.
Well, I think it's the opposite. I think, if you notice, there's not too many large name brand type property management companies here. And a lot of it is because the rules or the variety of rules. So there's some big chains that have pulled out in recent years because they just were cutting tens of thousands of dollars of checks and all the mess ups they're doing with the rental licenses, or they're cutting these big checks back to owners because things fell into abatement for 4 months. They don't understand their way around CHA. So CHA here is very unique to just Section 8, even in the suburbs or around the rest of the country. So there's a lot of things that I always joke around. I say we kind of, as a property manager, we kind of have a moat around Chicago that a lot of other people don't want to come here. So usually at these conferences, there's very few people. We had a few actual Chicago people there. This time we had Jared was out there with us, so that was a good time. But it's the cool thing too, is you get the perspective from other parts. And there's a lot of things that I brought back here that no one's really doing here yet, that I've taken either from West Coast or East Coast, where they have, maybe, getting ready for, they all have rent control out in the West Coast. So understanding what that kind of gives me an insight to what we might have to prepare for someday, if that ever, if we ever fail fighting that. So.
Got it. Good stuff. What, let's stay along those lines. What do we got for the landlord tip of the week?
All right. Landlord tip of the week. So this is just very real for us right now. And this happened a lot lately. We have a lot of people that are trying to apply that are presenting all fake information, fake pay stubs, fake job. And I say fake job, it's not even, but there's all these red flags that are catching them. So, I'll run through an example that we had yesterday. It was there's some company that this person worked for 7 years. They made $8,000. The company actually existed, but it's only been around for a year. The pay stub that they had, the dollar amount was off by $25. When you added some of the numbers up, something was off by $25. Payroll companies don't make those mistakes. The check number, the voucher number for that pay stub was off by, it was reversed to the number. So there's a lot of things and it was tough to find. We have this little magnifying glass that also looks at the font too, to see those things now. But there's a lot of these little things that, a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, for my $1,000 rental, $8,000 a month they're making. They're like, this is great, slam dunk. And maybe even skip some of the additional steps because they think, oh my gosh, this would be the best time I ever had in this $1,000 unit. And they get excited or blinded by the wrong thing. And I think a lot of those scammers out there use that approach to just kind of slide their way in. And I don't know what their end game was or what they're trying to do next, but there is some end game because we had a similar application, different name on it with same background and all that stuff come up on a different file in a different city. So they're out doing something. I'm not sure what their end game is, but it's kind of crazy.
Always do the due diligence, right? Someone can be great in person. Things can check a box. Just take the extra half hour and make the phone calls, talk to the past housing provider, call the employer. Like, don't skip it. Like, it's such 99% of the time it's gonna be fine, but you cannot skip that step.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I like it. Good value. Way to take something scary and turn it into a tip for our listeners. Mark, I like that one. All right. Today's guest, another heavy hitter here. So this guest was originally episode 15, 2 years ago, Mark, long time. If you're newer to the podcast, please go back and listen to it. We spend a lot of time discussing house hacking in Chicago. Today, we'll have a little bit of a different focus. We're going to talk about scaling, acquiring deals in this competitive market, and then underwriting for multifamily. All three topics that I think are, very, very accurate things that our listeners want to hear about. But today's guest, real estate entrepreneur, has partnered with professionals to invest in over $100 million worth of apartments. That all started with a house hack here in Chicago. So everyone who's looking at house hack to get to that, 9-figure number, this is living proof right here. He consults active multifamily investors to help them start or grow their business. He hosts the Multifamily Insights podcast, formerly known as Target Market Insights. Originally, that was some of the inspiration for Mark and I to focus specifically on Chicago. It was something you were doing in different markets there. Co-creator of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, along with past guests and my sponsoring broker, 𝗲𝘃𝗏𝗏. Someone who I would consider a mentor, has helped me scale tremendously over the last 2 years. So without further ado, John Casmon, welcome back. It's been a hot minute. Well, good to have you back, man.
Absolutely. Tom, Mark, it's great to be back. I mean, I was listening to you guys going back and forth, and I just took a note myself on that tip of the week, man. I got to call my property managers and make sure they're not letting some scammers into our properties, man. It's a hell of a tip.
Yeah.
There we go. See, you can always know, no matter how big you are, you can be learning something. We're still out there providing value.
Yeah, man,
so
I love it.
So, as I mentioned, your journey started here in Chicago. We're not going to recap everything. People can go back and listen to the previous episode. But you went from a house hacker to someone who's now, has professionals investing over $100 million of multifamily units. So let's start with a very basic question of, I'm a house hacker here in Chicago. I want to be John Casmon. I want to get that jump into multifamily. Where do I begin? What is the next step?
Well, the next step is definitely not to begin flipping, right? And the reason I say that is that was a step I took, and it was more quicksand. And the reason is this: there's nothing wrong with flipping or any strategy, but if you want to go down a path, you need to follow the logical step down that path. I started to try to explore different things and actually ran into some issues and realized, you know what? The best path to scale a multifamily portfolio is to figure out how to be involved in more multifamily deals, not trying this other thing over here that you have no desire to actually be a part of. So, if I were going back and I could talk to John or anyone who wants to be like John back then, it would be, how do you scale, into commercial real estate? So going from the 2 to 4 unit space to the 5+ unit space. So the first thing I actually did at that time was we bought an 8-unit building. My wife and I, we had saved money. And at this point, we had done a couple other smaller deals, smaller 2 to 4 unit deals. And this was working. It was working, right? I mean, this theory, this thing I'd read about in books and talked to people at these meetups and, listen to folks on podcasts, it was actually working out. So this was the test. The test was moving out of the 2 to 4 unit space and going into the 5+ unit space. We bought an 8-unit building in 𝗲𝘃𝗃𝗵𝗁. So if your listeners are familiar with where the 𝗲𝘃𝗃 market is, this is back in 2016. So we, at the time, were looking more in Avondale, Logan Square area. I'd owned stuff in Avondale. I'd owned stuff in North Center. And I felt like Logan Square, Avondale adjacent was where I really wanted to focus. 𝗲𝘃𝗃𝗵𝗁 obviously was a little west of there. And while I didn't love the area, it made sense. And I felt like, hey, the way I'm looking at this is the same way I think renters are going to look at it. They're going to want to be in Logan Square, want to be in Avondale. Prices are a little higher than they want it to be. And they start looking a little further west and ultimately get to 𝗲𝘃𝗃𝗵𝗁. And that deal gave me the confidence that we could do it. That deal actually didn't work out that great for me, to be honest with you. I mean, we sold it at a small profit. I really did not execute the business plan on that, but I learned so much from that deal that it gave me all the confidence in the world to scale into the larger properties. So I would say, hey, find your property where, again, whether it be 5 to 10 units, 5 to 12 units, big enough to push the envelope and to stretch you from what you're doing today, but also to really shore up and tighten up on some of these processes, maybe working with a third-party property management company and really understanding how to grow and manage a real estate portfolio.
Just a quick comment there. We have units at like, the 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵𝗁 area. That's not quite Avondale. And in our rental listing, we've been saying Avondale adjacent. So you're the first person besides myself to hear it. So I'm not going crazy. I like it.
First of all, I would call that Avondale. So I had a property that was, I think it's probably right around where you're at. I believe I can't remember the street that's just north of Avondale or of Belmont. It might be one or two streets north of Belmont. And then it was like literally the next street west. So, man, that's Avondale.
If you're north of Belmont, you go Melrose School, Roscoe, and going south, you got Barry Fletcher Nelson. So Nelson was the street that the property was on then. So listen, we put Avondale and no one ever questioned. Or 6 years ago too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I just want to take a step back there. Your mindset of going and doing the flipping, like, why? Like, what were you thinking at the time? Because I'm sure other people are thinking.
Yeah, great question. So as a matter of fact, you mentioned 𝗲𝗏, who was my partner on the Midwest Summit. 𝗲𝗏 was actually a big inspiration for me because 𝗲𝗏 at the time, she was running a meetup and was one of the first people running a meetup in Chicago. And I attended those meetups. And I remember 𝗲𝗏 went from 3 units. From the first time I met her, she had 1 3-unit property, and she went from that to 9 units, which I just thought was incredible. Again, keep in mind, I don't know any real estate investors, like real people, right, that I know. So at this time, she's one of the first people that I've seen actually invest and grow a portfolio. And she went from 3 units to 9 units, which I thought was incredible, right? And then from the time she went there, I bought my first duplex. So I feel like I'm in the game now. I'm a real estate investor, baby. So when I go to these events, I'm feeling better. I'm figuring out what the next step is. And I remember I bought a 3-unit building. So now I'm like, yo, I got 2 properties. I got 5 units under my belt, baby. Crushing it. And she went from 9 units to 90 units. And I said, what? That's... How? Like, how, Sway? You like, how you go from 9 to 90? Like, I get 9 to 19, but 9 to 90, 9-0. So I remember just being in awe. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. I'm like, did you have a windfall? Somebody died? You get a huge inheritance? Like, I just didn't understand. So I asked her, I said, hey, can I take you to breakfast? I just really want to learn a little bit more about how you were able to grow. And we went to breakfast, and the short version is she started working with other investors. And that was really the first time I even remotely thought about that as an option. And what happened in my business is, as you know, when you're starting out, you're using your money, your active income, right? You're taking your day job, your W-2 money, you're saving it up, and you're buying. So I did that with the first couple of deals. I did that with the 8-unit property. And by the time I bought the 8-unit property, we saved up, 6 figures worth of, income, bought this 8-unit property. And I remember feeling dejected, like, dude, I got to go do this again. Like, it's going to take me a year to save $100,000 plus to be able to buy another property. And I just had my second child. So I went back to that conversation, was like, okay. And 𝗲𝗏 told me 2 things. She said, there's 2 ways she sees people scale in this business. One is they start partnering with other people. The other is they flip properties and then take the income from the flip properties and use that to invest. So I had the bright idea to do both. I wanted to do both. So I was going to flip some properties over here and also start partnering with people over here. The only problem is when I went to flip, I found a guy who was he was a developer, and he was basically doing all the flipping. And all I had to do was come in with the money, put the property under my name, partner with this individual, and he would handle the rest. We split the proceeds 50-50. So on paper, it made sense. And by the way, I mean, this guy he was doing a trolley tour and walking everybody through these projects. And he had 50 people on these tours, and he was doing 6 deals at a time. So, I mean, we were looking at it and watching it and talking to people who had done it. So I felt pretty comfortable with it, but there were some red flags that we ignored. And in short, those projects failed miserably. And I learned another hard lesson, which was, when you're going through that vetting process, you really got to trust your gut and trust the training you do have. Just because somebody has more experience than you doesn't mean that they actually know more than you. They've done it and they're doing it, but a broken clock is right, twice a day. So you have to really understand, why are they having success, and understand what could happen that would change that. And from a business standpoint, I knew those things. I'm like, I've never flipped a property, but I read Jay Scott's book. I've listened to a ton of podcasts on flipping. I've read multiple books on flipping, and all of them tell me to do something different than what you're doing. And ultimately what we found out was, these guys had literally the worst business plan I've ever, like when I finally got the real story and I got the contract and I sat them down, you tell me everything I have. And these guys basically went into these deals planning to lose $10,000 a project, and they thought they could make it up at scale. And I'm like, have y'all failed math? If you're losing 10K a deal and you scale that up, you're going the wrong way. That's not the loss leader you want. You have to have another product that actually makes profit. You can't sell milk at a loss and then say, oh, but we're going to get them with the other stuff. So I mean, listen, I went on a tangent. I don't even know what your question was anymore. But my whole point in trying to flip was to generate more income so I'd have more money for multifamily. I never wanted to flip. I only wanted to do multifamily. Flipping was another means to an end. And if you're going to do it, I would say do it yourself, or do it with somebody you trust and who respects your opinion and your thoughts, as opposed to just blindly writing a check to somebody and praying that they don't mess it up.
Hold on. Before going further, a broken clock is always right twice a day. That is freaking hilarious.
Have you never heard that?
I've never heard that. I don't know if you guys saw me.
That's a pretty common saying.
I was wondering why you're dying.
I wish I could take credit for it. That's a pretty common saying.
Oh man, I love that. I was over here at the mute button because I couldn't hold it
in. Going along those lines, though, I think it's really important, if you're looking to passively invest with someone like John, to vet everyone, because anyone who bought a multifamily property in 2017, 18, whatever, they haven't lost money.
They made money. Yeah, they made money.
The dumbest guy in the room has made money because
you could do nothing and just do nothing and you made money.
Correct. Or make money in spite of you. You can make all the wrong decisions right, and you can still make money because, all boats rise with the tide. We're in that market. So when you're talking to someone, they're talking about what they've made over the last 3 years, 4 years, be very, very careful there, because that's kind of like the bar. The market has taken everyone, in this high rise here. So just to caveat on that point there. So another one I want to pull out too is, would you say that flip, I know it was probably painful and it sucked, but has that made you a better operator? Was that an experience when you look back at it and say yes, I'm glad this happened to me?
It's funny you say that, because I can say that now. For a long time, I would say no. And I'm going to tell you why, because it derailed my growth. There's this momentum you get in real estate, right? There's the law of the first deal, however you want to think about it. But we were building great momentum, at the 2-unit. I mean, I killed that 2-unit. First of all, let me give you some context. 2012, we buy a duplex in North Center. Okay. North Center at the time was a little sleepy, quiet, but great neighborhood that I realized was the only neighborhood that didn't lose any value during the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, 2010. That's what gave me comfort in investing in North Center. And one of the reasons why I launched Target Market Insights initially, because I was trying to replicate that success. And there was no neon sign pointing to me saying hey, this is the next neighborhood that's just like North Center. North Center blew up and I did extremely well there. So for me, when I think about the success and momentum we were building, it was great. I got ready to launch the podcast around that time. We were starting to plan on doing a conference and building up all this stuff. And at this flip project that just completely derailed, and it took up all of my time, all of my energy, a lot of my money. And it was very painful. A lot of stress between me and my wife, trying to manage this thing. And it was just a nightmare. I mean, I remember there was a night where I was there. We had the painting guys didn't show up. They were waiting to get paid. They didn't get paid. They didn't show up. So I ended up having to paint. And I'm there and I'm painting a ceiling. And I hear a little bit of water. Now I'm in the house by myself. And I hear a little bit of water. And I say, That's odd. Why am I hearing water? And moments later, I see a drip from the area I just finished painting. And I go upstairs and I realize that a pipe must have broke or something must have happened. What ended up happening is these clowns that we worked with, they put a nail in the plumbing, in the pipes. When they were putting up the drywall, they punched a nail where some of the plumbing pipes were, and the water was just dripping through the ceiling. And I had to redo the plumbing, I'm already way over budget at this point. And I remember this is like 2 in the morning. I just lost it. I'm by myself and I just lost it. I just cried like a little girl. And no offense, little girls are tough, by the way. So I cried like, like little me. I used to cry a lot as a kid. So I cried like little John. I sat in the corner and I just took 5 minutes and I got my shit together. Excuse my language. I got my stuff together. I said, all right, bro, figure it out, fix it and go. So I tell you this, the thing that I look back on very fondly is it literally was the worst case scenario before I went into this project. If you would have said, hey, John, if you flip this deal, what's the worst that can happen? I don't even think I could have drew that up by myself. I could not have failed worse by myself. And to have that level of failure gave me the confidence to say, you have to believe in your training. I'm not saying blindly believe in yourself, but if you've taken the time, you've listened to various podcasts, you've read various books, you've networked with successful investors, you understand how people lose money on deals, trust that work. You don't have to have experience actually doing it to learn from the people who are out there doing it. And the mistake I made was I just put my faith in this individual as opposed to trusting the masses of people. There's going to be rules, right? I mean, anything you do, you guys know about the 70% rule, right? With flipping. Well, we weren't even close to the 70% rule. So our margins were extremely thin from the jump, which is one of my big concerns out of the gate. But I ignored that because this person had experience in my mind, right? I'm like, well, what do I know? All I did was read some books. That was a huge mistake for me. And it's just, you got to have confidence in yourself. And no matter who you're looking to partner with, I don't care how much experience they have, they should either be able to justify their approach and explain to you why they do it a little bit differently than maybe what other people do, or they should respect your opinion and be able to take that feedback and incorporate it. Like right now, we're in a rising interest rate environment. Investors are asking, hey, man, how does this impact your approach? If I just say, hey, don't worry about it, they should run. They should just absolutely run and just, delete my email and never talk to me again. But I should be able to address those concerns and fears and say, hey, here's how we're planning on mitigating that factor so that it doesn't impact the deal. And I think that was the thing that for me, while it was tough at the time because it makes you question everything in your entire decision-making process, when you really can step back and look at it and say, well, what went wrong with this project and where did I make the mistakes? The mistakes were all up front. I mean, literally, I don't think there was a mistake we made once we were in the deal that we couldn't control because we literally had the relationship set up where that person was leading it. But and we did what we had to do to get it across the finish line. But you can't operate from a place of fear. If you're scared you're going to lose money, you're probably going to lose because you're going to make fearful decisions as opposed to doing what's right for the deal.
That's so good. I love when anyone comes on here and shares the failures like that because, everyone sees the success, the tip of the iceberg. They don't see everything that led you there. I can't remember the quote. It's definitely not mine, but going back to that flip, it's experience is what you get when you don't get what you want.
Ooh,
right. Like it's just like great example there. So Mark, chime in here. I know you're chomping at the bit.
Well, yeah, first I was going to say that no matter what, if you do drywall enough, you'll get a guy that will go through the copper on you. So I know I've had a few of those. But secondly, so like there had to be a point where it's like what got you through that to say, I'm going to come out the other side and keep down this. A lot of people give up and they do a couple of bad deals. They make a couple of bad investments. They invest in a couple of the wrong people. Like what?
Yeah, mentally to make that next offer. Yeah,
what was it inside you had, or was it having a plan from the beginning? Like kind of go down that road a little.
There's two answers to that question. One, for me personally, I have prided myself on not being a person who quits. I've never quit anything. I've decided I was done with things, but I've never quit. I've never quit because it got tough, right? I wrestled in high school. I wrestled in middle school as well, and I was pretty good in middle school. I got to high school, my freshman year, I lost every single match. Now, the history books will show that I won 4 matches, but they were all forfeits or buys. Okay. If somebody else lined up across from me, they won, period, for an entire year. And I remember my mom, my grandmother, they were like, why you keep doing this? You're coming home, your nose is crooked. You got a bloody eye. You got this pretty boy face and it don't look so pretty right now. Why are you doing this to yourself? And the reason was I was also in the marching band in high school, and, fall season, I'm in marching band. I remember sitting in the stands. There's a guy who played, I'll never forget this, obviously, as you could tell. There's a guy who played the trombone who was behind me. And I was talking to the girl next to me, and I told her I was going to try out for the wrestling team. And he just started laughing, and he said, oh, you can't be on the wrestling team. I tried out last year and it was too tough and I quit. And I said, I can never quit now. Just because I could not let this person's words be true. His mental capacity and his mental toughness could not seep into how I viewed myself. I never quit. I ended up finishing with, my name on the list for most career wins. The rest of them were not forfeits, by the way. I actually beat people. And it's just the mental makeup of mine. And it's one of the things where your weaknesses and your strengths are really closely aligned. And I am not a quitter. And it's a great thing. Many people would have pivoted and said, no, this didn't work. I'm going to do something else. I was like, well, damn it. It worked before. And I think this is the key. You have to be able to dig down and say, what wins do I have so I can keep my confidence? And because my first few deals were successful, I knew real estate worked. I was sold. I was 100% convinced that real estate was the path to build wealth, period. I had made more money when I refinanced that first property. I made more money than I made an entire year in my salary just on a refinance. So I knew this was the path. I knew something I didn't work. And I also knew that, hey, why did you do flipping? You didn't want to be a flipper. Flipping requires you to actually be at the property. It's a whole different mentality. So for me, strategy wise, I said, let's stick to multifamily, where it's more about managing people and rentals instead of being on site and trying to make sure the carpenter doesn't, punch a hole through the copper. Let's try to find properties that are already up and running and run the operations, do it that way. That's where I've got more of my background. So I think it's that. And then the other thing I will say is you have to surround yourself with successful people, because you really will become the people around you. And if you're around people who don't believe in real estate and you have these kind of failures, they're going to tell you, hey, man, I told you that was scary. You shouldn't be doing that. My cousin lost a lot of money in real estate. You do something else. That's too much. But Bree was a good friend of mine. She built her portfolio. Joe Fairless is a really good friend of mine and a mentor, and this man has built, went from a $7 million portfolio to almost a $2 billion portfolio. I was doing the podcast, which allowed me to talk to, very successful investors. So because I was around all of these people who I was learning from and talking to and building these friendships, I knew that we just needed to make adjustments to what I was doing. And I just felt that I would regret quitting, because I knew I could do it. And I was surrounding myself with the right people, the right conversations, the right network, the right skills. I knew I was doing all the right things. It was just a matter of perseverance.
That's awesome. Good answer. I just want to comment on one thing you said there for the listeners of flipping and what you're doing now with, buy and hold. Like, it is just two different personalities. Usually one person really likes one and hates the other, but might do it just because maybe it creates a short-term opportunity. But just consider when you're making decisions of which routes you're going down, which you prefer, which you really like, because there's going to be days that it's going to be your pleasure or your excitement about it or your love of it that's going to push you through some of the tougher times.
And Mark, I think the spreadsheet. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, I think the other key thing is I actually enjoyed, even though I lost money, I enjoyed the process. I just didn't like losing money. And my point is, the real problem for me was I had a full-time job and I had two young children under, 4 years old. I couldn't be at the property playing babysitter and manager. So I really needed to be in an environment where people did what they said they were going to do. If the electrician was going to be there today at 10, he just needed to show up. But if he didn't show up, or if I didn't call him at 10:05 and say, hey, man, it's 10:05, where you at? If I didn't do that, it didn't get done. And that's what it required. And for me, that was too much. And that's what I realized is you know what? Flipping is for somebody who is essentially very hands-on, and that is not the style that I can invest in at this point.
Awesome.
Good stuff. So John, let's talk, we scale, we get to a good point here, and you've been active through COVID here, right? Like you've added $10-20 million to the portfolio. It's been impressive. Deals are very hard to come by, especially in the space that you're playing in, and they're not just falling in your desk here. So talk about I know you've used the term creating deals, right? In this environment, when everyone is scrounging, how have you made things pencil? How have you created the opportunities for yourself and your investors?
Well, my background's in marketing and advertising. I spent 15 years in corporate America, helping to develop campaigns and ideas for various brands. And the way I look at the business is you have to develop a business plan first and foremost. And that's what I actually enjoyed about flipping, the parts I did enjoy, right? It's seeing what's there, figuring out what you can create, and then going and executing. And I think it's the same way with even buy and hold. Not quite as sexy, but to your point, it's not just take the rent roll, take the T12, throw them into a spreadsheet and see what the value is supposed to be. I think that's how a lot of people invest starting out. And many of your listeners, particularly those who buy in the 2 to 4 unit space, that's probably what you're doing, right? You're taking the current rent roll, maybe where you think rent should be. You're looking at the T12 or the income statement, and you're saying, okay, hey, based on, the income and where they're at, this property should be worth X. And the difference when you scale into larger commercial property is you have to factor in the upside potential or what you're going to create. It's almost like flipping, right? Because instead of strictly buying based on the current net operating income, we're going to take the current operations, look at our business plan, figure out, hey, if we flip this project and, improve the kitchens and the bathrooms and add these different amenities and these different other income line items, what would the property be worth then? That's the way we're viewing it. So that's the first step, is not to focus just on what exists, but focus on what you can create. And for me, it's taking a creative look at that. Again, it's easy to think about, well, hey, if we fix up the kitchens, we could rent this for X. That's the step many people take. The next step is to say, who are the real competitors? What other things could we do? What's going on with the other income line items? So that's everything from laundry income to think about technology. So that could be cable or internet packages. That could be, smart technology that you add into a unit. It could also be, pet fees and pet services. So I'm trying to look at all of those different factors based on the demographic of who the resident is, what's in the marketplace from a comparable standpoint, and determining what's the best business plan for that property. The other thing, and this is super key, is you cannot compete with hundreds of other investors because it's going to be very hard to find a good deal. So that doesn't necessarily mean you have to only go off market, but you have to change the way you look at it. And I think there's two ways you find a deal in this market. You either find a property that is being mismanaged, or you find a property that's being mismarketed. And mismarketed can mean that whether it's with the wrong broker, maybe it's with a residential broker and they don't get commercial, or it's a single family agent and she's never done a multi-unit property. So it's priced, wacky, or it's not even listed on the websites most investors would go to, or they don't see the real business plan or the real opportunity. And for us, that's really the key. Is sometimes people, they see what's there and they just try to do more of that, as opposed to saying, but actually, if you look at this, here's something else we could do that might be a pivot, or, maybe it's something you've seen another investor do, but it could create big windfalls for you. So it's just being creative really on what the business plan could be for that property.
All great stuff there, and couldn't agree with you more. I think the mismarketing is one that people overlook, right? Like there's a lot of, just because someone says it's X doesn't mean it is X, right? It could be Y. Like there's a reason. All the big guys must have passed. Not necessarily, right? It might not have passed their desk. People who are used to getting spoon fed, they're not really out there grinding and looking to find that arbitrage. So going back to that though, like what it could be, the potential. How do you balance? We get this question a lot. How do you balance what it is today? Like, here's the T12. Here's, I'm buying it at this cap rate. versus what it can be in 18 months. And you see that potential. But how much of that, like, where do you draw the line of what it could be versus what it could be today? Because there's some old school guys where this is what it is today. That's the price I'm paying, regardless of what the upside is. And on the other side of the spectrum, there's very speculative, like, yeah, but I'll buy it knowing that rents are going to go up, and like probably way too risky. And then there's a lot of people who fall somewhere in the middle there. And I think it's a very hard balancing act to value a property based on the current value and the future value. So can you share a little light, because you've done this, you've done it successfully. Like, how are you looking at that property? How do you balance that?
I think every investor has to approach this from their viewpoint. Our viewpoint is this: the deal has to make sense out of the gate. Yep. If the numbers don't work day one, then it just won't fly. Now, when we say don't work day one, what I mean is a positive cash flowing property. I don't necessarily mean give me a 10% cash on cash return day one. I just mean a property where there's enough income coming through to pay all the expenses, all the debt service, and still have some positive cash flow left over. So if we start there, then it's a matter of what's the upside and how much money can we actually make on the deal. Let's go back to flipping, right? If you think about flipping, there's zero income, right? You're going to take a property, do whatever it is you're going to do to it, and make no money in the meantime. And then you're going to finish it. And then to make your money, you either have to rent it out and refinance and pull out your equity, or you're going to sell it. So when you're doing the deals we're doing, which is the syndication value add deals, it really is a combination of the two. So it's not fair or smart to only look at it with one lens. You really do have to blend the strategies if you want to find that opportunity. Because if you find a deal, I mean, think about flipping, right? If you try to buy a project that the best use is to flip it, but you try to buy it like a rental, and let's say, you can get $400 or $500 for renting it today. But if you were to take the time and actually fix it up and make it look nice, you could get $1,200, like you would need to take an analysis of, hey, what's the right business plan for this deal? So I come back to the business plan and the strategy. What's the story? Because that's going to weigh heavily on it. If you're telling me, hey, there's a property here where I'm not going to make that much money, but the overall area is improving and there's not much I can do to force appreciation, that's where I'm concerned. So the key here is, what can you control? Can you force appreciation through renovations or other means of adding value or increasing the NOI? Or are you simply hoping that the market continues to go up? I would be very concerned in an environment where you only have the market to help you, versus if there's a clear path for you to force appreciation and increase the NOI and increase the cash flow.
Great stuff there. Love it. Love that answer. So along the same lines, you're looking at a ton of deals. Can you give our listeners an idea of just how many deals you look at to find one that works? Because I think a lot of people look at 4 or 5 things and say, oh, the market's overpriced.
So we basically work with a team of folks on the acquisition side at this point that look at a ton of deals, probably a dozen deals a week or so. Most deals we don't even bother to underwrite, to be honest with you, because we can look at them and we go through a quick analysis process where it's, what's the story? If there's not a gap between current rents and future rents, there's not going to be a way for me to increase the value. If I can't increase the value, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for me to give strong returns to our investors without assuming, oh, the market's just going to get better. And we don't like to do that. So if I can't force appreciation out of the gate, I already know I can't create the value that I feel comfortable with. So I'm not even going to bother underwriting it. Where's the property at? We have very strict criteria on where we're going to invest. So we take a look at that, and many properties don't, pass that muster. So there are a lot of things that end up coming into play. I mean, I probably have like 15 deals in my inbox right now, to be honest with you, just from the last day or two. So many of them they're not even worth putting, pen to paper on. But when we do find deals where the market makes sense, the story makes sense, that's where we'll dive in. And it takes a lot of them. I mean, we look at probably about 100 deals to get, maybe one that you feel good putting, maybe I shouldn't say one, maybe 5 where you feel good putting in a strong offer on because of the upside potential.
Yeah, it's a grind. I think most people, similar to cold call, and they give up, right? They give up after 1 or 2, and it's you got to keep going. You got to kiss a lot of frogs. So let's talk. You mentioned investors. Let's talk about structure now, right? So you did the Hermosa deal. Sounds like that was your own money. Going back to that, you had the conversation with Bree. Were you right out of the gate saying, you know what, we're going to syndicate this? Or did you find 2 or 3 guys in JV? Like, I love to, that's kind of like a black box to a lot of people. So let's start with explain the difference to our listeners of just JV versus, I'm going to syndicate, and then we'll go from there.
I didn't even know what syndicating was at that time. I knew I needed to partner with other people. I assumed it would be a JV. I didn't know what syndicating was. My vision was simply, if I found another 8 unit, to maybe go 50-50. So instead of waiting a year to invest, I could wait 6 months, or to, scale up, get a 12 unit, maybe a 16, 20 unit, something like that, and then be able to partner like that in a year. So that was my vision when I went down that path. What ultimately ended up happening is, again, you surround yourself with other people who are playing the game at a much higher level, and your eyes open up. And the key is, you can't unlearn something. If I tell you there's a path for you to invest in, 100 unit type complexes, well, now you know it's possible, especially if I give you the blueprint on how you do it. And I actually had a mentor that I worked with, and I watched that person grow their portfolio. And that really changed it for me to say, oh, wait a minute, like, you can do that? Or, well, how did you do that? And they start breaking it down and say, well, here's how you do it. You can partner with other people. There's a syndication process. Here's how you can raise money from people. Here's how you structure it. Here's how you put the deals together. So once we kind of understood those things, it really opened it up. And ultimately what ended up happening is, when you're looking at a deal and you're taking 100% of the profits, well, a lot of deals look pretty good. When you look at a deal, you're going to give 50 to 70% of the profits to someone else. Well, man, those numbers don't look quite as good when you're using the same metrics and same underwriting, because you don't want to buy, let's say, a 10 unit. You don't want to buy a 10 unit property and make like $2,000 a year on it. Right. And that's the thing. And that's probably being nice. But that's the part where it's like, okay, wait a minute. How much time and money am I investing? How much energy am I investing? And what am I getting back for it? Because to buy $1 million property and to basically make $1,000 on it, that's probably not the return you're really looking for. And that's not the way to scale and to build a business that allows you to change. And keep in mind, for me, the reason I was scaling this was I wanted to insulate myself from being let go from my job. I wanted financial freedom. I worked for General Motors when they went bankrupt. I worked for an advertising agency, and that agency ended up going bankrupt. So I had been at 2 companies that went bankrupt when I started my investing journey. So when that second one happened, I really had to say, okay, how do I make sure this, my family is not impacted? And I had my first child at that point. So you also have to look at just the raw numbers, like how much money am I actually going to make? And if you're going to do a deal, make sure you're doing deals that allow you to get the best return on your investment.
Got it. What was it like approaching those investors, right? You had a little bit of a track record.
Scary, man. Scary. You're right. I mean, there's a little bit of a track record. I was very intentional about doing that 8 unit deal. And part of the reason was I needed the self-confidence to be able to tell people I have invested in a commercial property with my money. I have a professional property management company managing it. And I think I mentioned this on the first time we had this show, but I actually called Mark as one of the first people. And Mark said, hey, John, congratulations. I don't do that side of town. Here's a contact you can call and talk to. And we ended up working with those individuals, and we brought them on to manage that property.
I do that side of town now, just so we're on the same page.
There you go. Okay. He's got tired of referring business away, probably. But the thing for me is it gave me the confidence to at least have these conversations, right? We all have our self-doubt. We all have some level of imposter syndrome. Don't listen to, the folks who get on the podcast and they just talk about all the success. We all have had some of these things, right? It's difficult to put yourself out there. But when you do it, it's just like any other exercise. You do it once, you do it a second time, you do it a third time, it gets easier and easier. You feel more comfortable. It's just like hopping on this podcast. Man, listen, the first time I did a podcast, I had all my questions laid out. I don't think I looked up to look at the person. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a whole different experience, but you get on there, you do it enough times and you get more comfortable. So that first phone call, It was tough, but there was a process and I had somebody who coached me through it. And I did it with that individual first. So I got a little bit of comfort and they kind of helped me figure out how to have that conversation. And I will tell you this, anyone who is looking to talk to investors, I will tell you that there are three things you need to focus on. Okay. I call them the 3 C's to attract capital. The first is confidence. The confidence is going to come from the work you put in. The more you talk the talk, you focus on your education, podcasts, books, underwriting, build that confidence. Okay. Put the reps in. That's going to get you more comfortable. And that is critical if you're going to talk to people. Nobody wants to invest with somebody who's unsure. Oh, I hope it works out. Listen, I'm not investing with you. You don't even believe in yourself. So you got to have the confidence, but it can't be false bravado. It can't be something that you're just faking until you make it. It's that exactly. And it doesn't have to even be from experience, but it has to be from, the work you put in. The second C is credibility. And this is key because if you don't have the experience that you can lean on, then you're going to need to build that up. One, you probably have more transferable skills than you're giving yourself credit for. If you work in the professional setting, maybe you've got some project management skills, maybe you have some analysis skills, maybe you have other skills that are relevant to the space. So make sure you lean on that. Again, I only had my small portfolio. I did have the one commercial deal. So that was the experience that gave me some credibility. Again, was it the most credible thing in the world? No, but for the people I was talking to, it was way more experience than they had, right? And I had managed my own properties, and I was working with this property management company that I was, managing and overseeing as well. So that helped tremendously. And I would say this is also where it's key to have either partners or property management companies or a mentor or a coach. You just want to build the team where you could say, hey, I know I've only done this, but here's the full team. Here's who I got around me that's going to help us take this deal down and see it be and make sure it's successful. And then the last is going to be connections. I think too often people focus on their friends and family exclusively. Your mom loves you, your auntie, your uncle, your cousins. I'm sure they love you a lot, but they are probably not your ideal investor. And ultimately, you want to leverage those individuals to help identify who are the people that they know who are looking to invest in real estate or have some real estate investing experience and would want to invest in your deal. It's the same way that if you were opening up a bakery or you're going to cater weddings or something like that, you don't go to your mom and say, hey, I'm starting this bakery company. Can you buy 2 sheet cakes from me? You're going to say, hey, I'm launching this business. They probably know that you've been baking for a long time. So you're going to talk to them about that. If they don't know, you probably need to start with, hey, you may not know this, but I love baking and I've enjoyed it. It's been a passion of mine and I'm launching this company. And do you know anyone who's getting married soon or having a graduation or having a birthday party? If so, I'd love to talk to them and share a little bit more about, my capabilities and maybe even cater their event. That's the approach you would take if you were starting any other business. That's the approach you need to take if you're going to look to raise money for real estate deals. So those are the 3 C's to attract capital. So your confidence, credibility, connections.
How do people get connected with a mentor or a coach, or like when people get off here and think, all right, well, where can I go from here? Like, what type of advice do you have for mentors and coaches?
If you're looking for a mentor or coach, I would say you have to network. I mean, podcasts are a great place to start. You can ask for referrals, meetups are good. You could probably, I'm guessing you can Google it and find some options there, but I would try to find somebody you feel comfortable with. There's different programs out there, different resources out there, but I think it's really important to find someone who can understand where you're at today and where you're trying to get to, and can help you connect the dots on that journey. So that's where I would start. I would try to talk to people and find out, hey, have you worked with anybody? Is there somebody you recommend? That's where I would start. We actually launched a coaching program a couple of years back. So, I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who get it the way you get it, as opposed to, just being involved in any program. And the other thing is get clear on what you want coaching for. I think too often people are adverse to coaching or paying for coaching, I should say, because they feel like, oh, there's a ton of free information. Yeah, and it's free for a reason, right? I love Bigger Pockets. Love it. It helped me tremendously grow in my business. I've talked to you about some of the mentors and friendships that I've had. I've called Mark to have him help me find a property management company, right? So I'm not against those things. But when you find a specific issue that you want to overcome, that's where I think the coaching becomes critical. For me, it was real simple. I was okay losing my money. I've done it. I was not okay losing someone else's money. And I decided when I wanted to work with other investors, that's what pushed me to coaching, because I knew that I had success. I was pretty good at finding target markets and things like that. I wasn't sure of what I didn't know. And I wanted somebody who could look over my shoulder and identify any blind spots and help me navigate that.
I'm a big believer in coaching. And I think, you can get that free information, or you could bother people with random questions. But at the end of the day, you need someone to really help break down that rawness inside you and really kind of pull out. A lot of coaching and mentoring brings out like the truth that's holding you back and those roadblocks. So I'm a big fan. So you're doing coaching, and we'll make sure we'll put that up there in the show notes as well too. Your podcast, you think you're coming up on 400 episodes?
400. It'll probably be aired by the time we air this thing.
Yeah.
So just real high level, congratulations. First off, that's awesome. We were very proud to get to 50 and then 100. But so
I'm trying to think, how do we catch them? We just air one every day.
Yeah, we get every day. But what made you start that, and what has that done for you?
Thank you. There's two things that made me start it. One, I initially started with the blog, realized I didn't know how to do a blog. I don't know. I didn't know what topics to write about. I didn't have a goal in mind. And my mentor was really big on a thought leadership platform. So, with my marketing background, I already knew and understood why. And the big thing was, go back to what we just talked about. If you're launching a business, how are you going to find clients or customers for that business? I was going into this real estate business, and I wanted to show people, hey, you know what? Here's what I'm doing. I'm serious about it. I'm committed to this. And launching a podcast was a great way to demonstrate that to other people. The other thing for me, and specifically why it was Target Market Insights, now Multifamily Insights, is I talked about that success I had with that North Center property. I talked about understanding Avondale and the success we had there, even recognizing Hermosa was going to be an area that was going to improve. As I started to look more and more in Chicago, it became harder and harder to find those markets where I could bring on an investor, give them a decent chunk of the deal, and still have it be worth my while. So we started to look in other markets. But when I went to other cities, I had no idea how to identify where I should be investing. In Chicago, I knew the area, right? I talked to so many people who I knew were in Logan Square or Avondale. And it's just, go to enough events, you talk to enough people, you know where to invest, or you know where the hot spots are. I had no idea how to do that in other cities. So that helped me figure out where to find data, what metrics should I be paying attention to, and really allowed me selfishly to pick the brains of some of the most successful investors in the country. And if you do that enough, you figure out, well, what did they all said? Well, they all said the same things after a while. They talked about population growth. They talked about population growth, job growth, industry diversification. So make sure that there's different industries, different types of employers in that area. They talked about ease of doing business or business friendly environment, and a place that is landlord friendly, So when you factor all those things in, okay, now I have a sense of what to look for in a market and figure out which sub markets are best suited for investments.
Love it. Good stuff, man. John, this has been just a ton of information. This is probably like one of our most insightful episodes. So really appreciate it. Mark, let's jump to the wrap, brought to you by our friends over at Renovo.
So we're going to have you come back, because I think I have 3 or 4 questions we even get to. So
I know we're at the hour here.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
So we know we got ADV listeners. So, all right. As a syndicator, what is your competitive advantage?
For me specifically, or syndication versus other strategies?
No, for you. Why Casmon
as
Capital?
A syndicator.
So for me, it's really that marketing background and just understanding people, building relationships, and being authentic.
Love it. John, explicitly, what is the one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Pull the trigger. Do it. Because figure out what your fear is, what's stopping you. Is it fear that it's the height of the market, or what? Someone said this to me the other day, and I thought it was really insightful. They said, if you've been investing at any point over the last 10 years, you've invested at the height of the market. So it's always, it's been the height of the market. In 2012 was the height. 2015 was the height. 2018 was the height. Today it's the height. So don't let that stop you. It's not to say that it's always going to go up. It's to say that don't let that stop you. If you focus on the fundamentals of investing and make sure you have a long-term view in place and you have options of how you could exit or stay in a deal, you'll be fine. Just make sure you have reserves.
Awesome. Great answer. What do you do for fun?
I don't know. I'm a terrible golfer. I like to hack away at some balls. I like to stay pretty, pretty athletic. So try to, work out, run. I don't really love running. It's not fun, but I'll do it. Play with my kids primarily.
You can't name your own, but what is a good podcast, book, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners?
Man, I got a laundry list, but I'll give one book that I love. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone who's listened to me the last couple of years have heard me rave about it. I just love the simplicity and the fact that what's in that book is applicable immediately. It's not this goal setting book. It's not about this overarching thing. It's really about how to break down the mundane day-to-day things so that you can see more success in your life. That, and then I would say too, I finally listened to or read Who Not How, and I thought that was another really good read.
Mark, can you take credit for that recommendation?
I don't know.
Mark's been recommending that book to everyone for the past year. It's been his go-to.
For the last 2 years. Gap and Gain's the new one from Dan Sullivan. Atomic Habits, habit stacking. I mean, that's the number one thing that I still kind of, all right, I got to start doing this every day. How can I do it? And I take that back. So that's been a very influential book on me as well.
Yeah, you don't get great daily, or you don't get great in a day, you get great daily, or whatever the quote is.
So, all right, besides yourself, name one person in your local network that you would highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
In Chicago or here in Cincinnati where I'm at now?
Nah, Chicago.
Okay. But you said local network. I just want to make sure we were clear. Man, there's so many people, man. I mean, Bre is a good friend. I mean, definitely recommend Bre. I would also say our friends over at, well, never mind. You just said Renovo is your sponsor. Renovo is great too. Renovo is great too. I just got off the phone with one of their competitors. So I was thinking of them. I'm trying to think of other industries, right? So from, I'll stick there. I'll just stick with that.
All right.
Sounds good. John, thanks so much. You provided a ton of value to our listeners. We will link to your site, link to the podcast. But how else can they find more about you? And is there any way they can provide value to you?
So a couple things. We have a sample deal package on our website. If you have listened to me talk about scaling in a multifamily and you want to wrap your head around like what are some of those differences and what should you expect, check out the sample deal, whether you want to be active or even passive. I think it helps to give you a sense of what you can expect with deal structures, return expectations, market information. That's available at casmoncapital.com/sample deal. And then check out the podcast as well. Multifamily Insights, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Good stuff. We'll link to all that in the show notes. All right. Time for our Chicago fact. Mark, you get first crack at it. John, you'll get a shot as well. And listeners, if you have a Chicago fact you want to share, please send it to us on the site. We'll use it on a future show. And I had to pull one in here to get 𝗖𝗍ci involved. So we got a Chicago 𝗖𝗍ci combo here. So, Mark, in the late 19th century, Chicago and 𝗖𝗍ci competed to be the leader in the lucrative meatpacking industry. Side note of all this, that's what resulted in the creation of the White Sox. That was our response to Cincinnati's popular Red Stockings team, which later became the Cincinnati Reds. But your question, both cities competed for this nickname, ultimately won by 𝗖𝗍ci, and multiple choice. So for the lucrative meatpacking industry, was that name A, Meat Street, B, Porkopolis, C, Butcher Boulevard, or D, Slaughter City?
I will go with Slaughter City.
John, what do you want to go with?
I was going to go with the same one.
Oh, you guys got to diversify. Porkopolis.
Was it?
Porkopolis. I did not make that up.
Before I heard Slaughter City, I was going to think pork, but I'm like, that's limited too much to one type of meat. So
there's not a lot of Chicago 𝗖𝗍ci facts, guys. I had to dig deep here.
That is awful, man. Wow.
Look at you, dude, finding facts there.
That's all right. I love it, though.
Yeah, look at you.
Not a good use of my time. So listeners, please bring in some facts.
All All right, John, thanks for coming back. Tom, thanks as always. Listeners, please visit our website, download our house hacking calculator. John has got it all started here with house hacking, so you can get it started here as well, or analyze your future house hacking deals. We will be coming out with another calculator soon that I'm working on, so I'm excited about that. So stay tuned for that. John, thank you very much. And don't forget, everyone, smash that subscribe button.
Love it.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks as always, listeners. We'll see you next week.
Thanks all.